Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Mindset Matters. So today I want to come back to some basics in terms of what Cashflow Quadrant is. And I think it's an important concept because for anyone who wants to have any sort of financial freedom, it's a very fundamental concept to grasp and understand. Without understanding how the Cashflow Quadrant and how you're operating in the Cashflow Quadrant, it's impossible for you to be able to achieve financial freedom to a degree. The first time I've seen this Cashflow Quadrant idea is actually in Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's a very powerful fundamental concept to grasp because it actually alerts me to where I was operating in the 4 quadrants and where I need to move to. So that's why I thought today it makes sense to actually bring everyone and change everyone's mentality, or at least have that awareness to know where you are currently and where you should be moving into. Okay, let's have a look. All right, so I've drawn it up on the board here and you can see the 4 quadrants. What we call the ESBI. E is the employee quadrant, B is the business quadrant, S self-employed, and I investor. So these 4 quadrants each represents different type of cash flow sectors. And I've written it up here as well. So if you're an employee today, basically your income is basically its time. So your income is determined by time. You have to trade time to be an employee. In other words, you have a job in order to make that income. Now, let's move down here. If you're self-employed today, which means you actually own a job, or you run a business, but you're actually the only person that's working in it. That's what we call self-employed. And in essence, your income is still determined by the time. So you have to actually put in time in order to actually get income. Let's move to the right of the quadrant, which is the interesting part. Business. So if you are able to create a business, and when we say business here, basically it's about leveraging other people's time and money and resources. So that's why it's important to have the word leverage here. So if you have able to leverage and also have a system in place, then essentially it's very powerful. And you don't need to rely, your income is not determined by your time, but it's more determined by the amount of leverage that you're able to get, other people's time, money, and the system that's in place that will determine the income for business. And last but not least, investor. So investor's income is based on, again, leverage. So if you're able to leverage a certain degree, like for example, if you want to purchase a property, then you'll be able to leverage banks' money in order to settle the property. You borrow at 80% loan to value ratio, for example. That's leverage. And also you need to have money. You need to have some sort of deposit to be able to get to be able to be an investor. Now, whether that's obviously buying shares. So if you buy shares, then that's using your money, or deposit to be able to settle the property. Okay, so you need the amount of money and the amount of leverage that you can get will determine the income for an investor. So that's a basic fundamental definition of the 4 quadrants. Now, next, let's have a look at where you are at the moment and where you need to be. So now that you know what the definition of the 4 quadrants are, I think the next thing we'll be looking at is where you are currently and where you need to be in order to be able to achieve financial freedom. So for most of the people who actually is an employee, you can clearly tell you're under the E quadrant, and therefore your income is capped by the amount of time and you have a job. Now, that's not going to get you anywhere in terms of financial freedom, is it? Because in other words, you have to constantly trade your time to be able to make an income. Not ideal. Same thing with self-employed. Basically, you own a job. So you don't have a job, you're being employed by yourself, but you still own a job. Okay, so your income is again determined by time. So again, that's not ideal, is it? So in summary, we can conclude that the left side of the actual cash flow quadrant is trading money with time. And that's what we want to get out of. When I read the book, I'm fully aware at that time, I was very well in the employee in the E quadrant. And I'll be thinking about how am I going to be able to move to the right side of the quadrant, which is the one that you can make income without trading your time. So that's an important concept. The right side is leaning towards financial freedom because you're able to make income without trading time. And how they're going to be able to do that. Let's say, for example, you have a business, you're a business owner, or you may have owned a number of businesses. Now, the definition of a business here is something that's different to self-employed. You don't have to be there 40 hours a week to be able to work in the business or on the business. Okay, so you've got people who's actually running. So, you might have a CEO that's running the business for you. You'll have all the directors that's also running and managing the people. And you have a system in place. So, you've got the business processes in place, which allows your employees to be able to work effectively and generate revenue for you. So you don't have to be in the office or sitting in front of your desk for revenue to come in. That's business. That's the definition of business here. And that's why the income here is determined by the amount of leverage. So in other words, the number of people that you can employ, the more people that you can employ and the more effective the business system is, then the more income that you'll have. Because you're effectively leveraging other people's time and money and their expertise rather than yours. If you're only by yourself, it's very limited. You only got limited time, you only got limited capacity, you got limited energy. You can't achieve everything yourself in a very limited finite space. So that's why it's very powerful when you're able to grow a business and have these people, be able to leverage these people and also be able to have a system in place. These two add up together will work very, very effectively to build a business that will generate the revenue for you. And last but not least, this is the investor route at the moment. For someone to be an investor, basically you do need to use money. You do need to have the money because the fundamental principle here is use money to generate money. So by putting in a small portion of money, you're able to generate a return on investment. And then that return on investment, again, you could either leverage using that return or potentially just put the return again into investing without leveraging. Okay, so as an investor in this type, you can, there's lots of asset classes here, of course, property, shares, mutual funds, like a lot more. So these are type of mentality of investor. But again, an investor does not trade time. So let's say, for example, using the classic example of property, if you own a piece of real estate and you rent it out, then essentially the rental income that comes in is passive. You do not need to be there asking the tenant or do anything for that rental income to come in. And that's what we call passive income. And that passive income is essentially what you want to be able to achieve. So everything on the right-hand side of the quadrant, the B and the I, is essentially what you want to be able to get into to achieve financial freedom. And that's what I've been trying to do in the last couple of years when I've actually built up my portfolio as an investor while I still kept my day job. So I kept my day job because I need the income, and I use the income that I sacrifice, I trade with time to be able to leverage and generate the passive income in the I stream, in the investor stream. And at the same time, when I quit my corporate job, I moved from employee to business. And at the moment, I'm building a business. Well, I should say I'm actually more self-employed at the moment, but the goal is definitely build the business to a point where I can leverage, where I can hire people, and I've got a system in place that can actually run the business and generate a revenue for me. Then I don't have to actually spend time working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week in order to actually achieve my financial freedom. So think about where you are today and think about what you can do. You might have a full-time job, and you can actually choose to go down the investor route. If you don't want to build a business, that's absolutely fine. But if you're able to actually go down the investor route, invest in something that can generate you the passive income, then essentially that's what's going to achieve that financial freedom for you. Or if you want to take it to the extreme, do both, like me. Invest in properties, later on shares, etc., and also build a business that can leverage other people's money, time, and expertise. Okay, so that's a cash flow quadrant discussion. I hope that helps. If you've got any questions, feel free to comment below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share with your friends. Otherwise, I'll see you again in next week.